Picture this scenario. You're lying in your warm bed right now, maybe scrolling through your phone before sleep, completely comfortable. Now, imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering your house has been replaced by a massive stone fortress with walls thicker than your car is long. No heating system, no insulation, no electric blankets. Just you, some rough blankets, and the bitter reality that you need to survive the next 8 hours without becoming a human popsicle. Welcome to medieval castle sleeping, where staying alive through the night was literally a matter of life and death. Medieval castles weren't cozy retreats. They were military fortresses designed with one goal in mind: keeping armies out. Comfort was never part of the equation. These structures were essentially giant stone refrigerators that happened to have rooms inside them. The walls could be 15 feet thick in some places, made entirely of stone that absorbed cold like a massive frozen sponge. Once that stone got cold, it stayed cold for days, radiating an icy chill that would seep into your bones and refuse to leave. The architecture itself was working against anyone trying to stay warm. Think about it. Enormous great halls with ceilings that soared 40 feet high, creating vast empty spaces that were impossible to heat effectively. Narrow window slits that let in freezing drafts but barely any sunlight. Spiral staircases that acted like giant wind tunnels, channeling cold air from the bottom of the castle all the way to the top. Every design element that made these places excellent for warfare made them absolutely miserable for sleeping. But here's where it gets really brutal. Most castles didn't even have proper chimneys until well into the medieval period. Before the 12th century, if you wanted a fire, you lit it in the middle of the room and hoped the smoke would find its way out through holes in the ceiling. Spoiler alert, most of it didn't. So you had a choice between freezing to death or slowly suffocating on smoke. Many people chose the smoke, and many people died because of it. Carbon monoxide poisoning was a real and constant threat in poorly ventilated stone rooms. The heating solutions that did exist were primitive and dangerous. Wealthy nobles might have a brazier, which was essentially a metal bowl filled with burning coals. These provided some warmth, but imagine trying to sleep, peacefully knowing there's an open fire burning in your wooden-furnished bedroom. House fires were incredibly common, and once they started in these massive stone structures, they could rage for days. The stone walls that kept enemies out also trapped heat and smoke in, turning the entire castle into a deadly oven. For the average person living in a castle, warmth was a luxury they couldn't afford. Servants often slept in unheated side chambers, hallways, or even stables. Kitchen workers were actually some of the luckiest, because they could curl up near the cooking hearths after the evening meal was prepared. The kitchen fires burned almost constantly, making these areas some of the only consistently warm spaces in the entire structure. Now let's talk about the medieval sleeping arrangement that actually worked: the curtain bed. This wasn't furniture, it was survival equipment. Picture a tent within a room, surrounded by heavy wool or leather curtains that could be pulled completely shut. When you climbed into bed at night, you weren't just lying down. You were sealing yourself into a fabric cocoon designed to trap every bit of body heat you could generate. These beds were raised several feet off the floor to avoid the worst of the drafts that crept along the stone surfaces. The mattress was usually a large sack stuffed with straw, feathers, or whatever organic material was available. Not exactly comfortable by modern standards, but it insulated your body from the cold stone below. The curtains were lined with additional fabric, sometimes wool, sometimes fur if the family could afford it. Some wealthy households used felt blankets as thick as modern rugs as extra insulation around the bed frame. But here's the thing about medieval sleeping: you never slept alone. Privacy was a luxury that simply didn't exist when survival was at stake. Families packed into beds together, sometimes 4 or 5 people sharing the same space. Children slept with siblings, servants slept with other servants, and even nobles often shared beds with family members or trusted attendants. Body heat was precious, and wasting it on personal space was literally life-threatening. The wealthy had another secret weapon: servants whose entire job was keeping their masters from freezing to death. These dedicated attendants would begin preparing the bedroom hours before bedtime. They'd light fires, set up braziers, and most importantly, prepare bed warmers. These were flat stones heated in the fire until they were almost too hot to handle, then wrapped in cloth and placed throughout the mattress to preheat the sleeping area. Some servants would heat water and pour it into metal bottles or ceramic jars, creating medieval hot water bottles that could keep feet warm throughout the night. The most dedicated servants would actually sleep in chairs beside their master's bed, ready to add fuel to fires, bring additional blankets, or provide warm drinks if their lord or lady stirred during the night. But here's a fascinating contradiction. The wealthiest nobles often had the coldest sleeping quarters. Their bedrooms were typically located in the highest towers of the castle, as far from the ground as possible to display their elevated status. Unfortunately, this also meant they were the most exposed to wind and weather. These tower rooms often had large windows to show off the family's wealth. But remember, glass was incredibly rare and expensive. Most windows were just openings covered with wooden shutters or thin oiled cloth that did almost nothing to block the cold. Meanwhile, servants and lower-ranking household members often slept in basement chambers or rooms adjacent to the kitchens, where the residual heat from cooking fires provided some warmth throughout the night. The irony is striking. In medieval castles, your proximity to warmth often mattered more than your social rank when it came to surviving the night. The real heroes of castle sleeping were the night guards. These men had to stay awake and alert throughout the frigid nights, walking the walls and watching for enemies while everyone else was bundled up in bed. They couldn't light fires on the battlements because the flames would alert potential attackers to their positions. Instead, they developed ingenious ways to stay warm while remaining vigilant. Guards would wrap heated stones in cloth and tuck them inside their clothing. They'd carry small flasks of spiced wine or strong ale, not to get drunk, but to keep their blood circulating and maintain alertness. Some chewed on cloves or other strong spices to stay awake and generate internal heat. They'd stamp their feet constantly, swing their arms, and huddle together whenever possible, looking like a group of birds trying to stay warm on a frozen branch. The consequences of failing at this nighttime survival game were severe. Guards who fell asleep at their posts faced harsh punishment, but falling asleep could also mean death from exposure. Winter deaths were tragically common in medieval castles. People would go to sleep and simply never wake up, victims of hypothermia or carbon monoxide poisoning from poorly ventilated heating attempts. Families developed elaborate bedtime rituals around staying warm. Children were taught to curl up in specific positions that conserved body heat: knees tucked to chest, arms wrapped tightly around the torso, head covered to prevent heat loss. Adults would wear multiple layers of clothing to bed, including wool caps, thick socks, and sometimes even leather boots that never came off during the coldest months. Some castle dwellers took advantage of animal body heat. Sleeping near livestock in the castle stables was actually a viable survival strategy. Cows, horses, and other large animals generate significant warmth, and many servants would rather share space with animals than freeze alone in unheated chambers. Dogs were particularly prized as sleeping companions because they could be brought into the main living areas and would curl up with their human families throughout the night. The morning routine in a medieval castle was just as challenging as the night. People would wake up to see their breath in the air, even inside their bedrooms. Water left in basins would often be frozen solid. The first task of every day was getting fires restarted, a process that could take significant time and effort when your hands were numb with cold. Wealthy families employed servants specifically to handle the morning warming routine. These attendants would arrive before dawn to restart fires, warm clothing by the flames, and prepare hot drinks to help their masters transition from the relative warmth of bed to the brutal cold of the castle interior. For everyone else, the morning was a race against time to generate enough heat to function. Religious communities living in castle-like monasteries developed particularly sophisticated cold-weather survival strategies. Monks and nuns would often sleep in large communal dormitories where dozens of people could share body heat. They'd layer their sleeping areas with straw for insulation and coordinate their daily schedules around the times when certain areas of their buildings received direct sunlight. The psychological impact of constant cold was enormous. Medieval people developed a completely different relationship with warmth than we have today. Every flame was precious, every bit of body heat was conserved, and the arrival of spring wasn't just welcomed, it was celebrated as a literal lifesaver. The concept of wasting heat was almost unthinkable because waste could mean death. Castle builders did eventually develop some ingenious solutions to the heating problem. Some later medieval castles featured hypocaust systems, where hot air from basement fires was channeled through hollow walls to distribute heat throughout the structure. Others included heated floors in certain rooms, created by running warm air through channels beneath the stone. But these innovations were expensive and rare, limited to only the wealthiest households. The clothing people wore to bed deserves special mention. Medieval sleepwear was essentially multiple layers of daytime clothing. People slept in wool tunics, leather boots, thick stockings, and heavy cloaks. The idea of light, comfortable pajamas would have seemed insane to someone trying to survive a castle winter. Every piece of fabric was armor against the cold, and removing any layer could be the difference between life and death. Food played a crucial role in nighttime warmth as well. Medieval people understood that certain foods could help generate internal heat. Spiced wines, hearty stews, and foods high in fat were consumed specifically to help the body maintain temperature throughout the night. The evening meal wasn't just about nutrition. It was about fueling the internal furnace that would keep you alive until morning. The social dynamics around warmth created interesting hierarchies within castle communities. People who controlled access to heat held real power. Kitchen masters, firekeepers, and servants who managed the household heating systems were valued members of the community because their skills were literally life-saving. Knowledge about fire management, fuel conservation, and heat distribution was passed down through generations like precious family secrets. As we wrap up this chilling journey into medieval sleep survival, it's important to recognize that these weren't just historical curiosities. These were real people facing genuine life or death challenges every single night. They developed incredible resilience, ingenuity, and cooperation because their survival depended on it. Every technique they used, every strategy they developed, was born from the absolute necessity of making it through another frozen night. The next time you adjust your thermostat or pull an extra blanket over yourself, remember the medieval castle dwellers who faced the bitter cold with nothing but wool, determination, and each other. They didn't just survive those brutal nights. They thrived, built communities, raised families, and created the foundation for the warm, comfortable world we inhabit today. Their legacy isn't just in the stone castles that still dot the landscape, but in the human spirit that refuses to surrender, even when surrounded by walls of ice-cold stone and the howling wind of a medieval winter night.